Hi everyone, I am Alexander Lim, and welcome to AuthorStory, where we highlight in every episode a different book of interest. This week's book is Teaching with Tenderness Towards an Embodied Practice, and the author is this episode's guest, Becky Thompson. And for those of you following along who are interested, you can go over now to the Amazon link in the description below the video and check out or get a copy of her book. So Becky, welcome to AuthorStory.
Thank you so much for having me on your important show.
Oh, you're welcome. You're very, very welcome. So, Becky, for starters, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your author story?
I'm a poet
Okay.
and an activist and a yoga teacher
Hmm.
and a mother, and I just became a grandmother a few months ago.
Oh, wow.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. She's just totally beautiful.
Wow.
And I'm also a professor. I've taught at a number of schools at the University of Colorado and at Bowdoin College and at Duke University and Wesleyan University, and I'm currently teaching in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working on this idea about what it means to practice tenderness for pretty much all my life, always learning along the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what's sort of what's your topic that you teach in these academic institutions?
I teach sociological theory and
Ah.
birth and death, the sociology of joy and suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and a course called Love Calls Us to the Things of This World,
Right.
about world social justice leaders, and a doctoral course on teaching from an inclusive perspective, and a number of other courses.
Okay, got that. So, so your topic on tenderness, and this isn't exactly like a, like a yoga woo-woo kind of thing. I mean, there is some academic regimen, academic disciplines applied to this as well.
Oh, definitely. I know that's the problem, is that people often think about tenderness as some kind of Hallmark card.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm actually trying to think about it as a capacity of learning and being with each other that continues to be undermined when we are dealing with so many structural inequalities, including racism and poverty and the backlash against immigrants. So it's, what does it mean to try to keep our hearts open and our learning free as we're also in such challenging and stressful times?
Yeah, true, true. Okay, so about the book, Becky, can you tell us what it's all about for those of us who don't know and who it's for?
Sure. I wrote it for students and teachers at the undergraduate and the graduate level, but also for K through 12. But it goes way beyond talking about tenderness in the classroom, although that's where I start, because I'm also talking about what it means to try to practice tenderness throughout our lives. So it's infusing it into what we do during the mornings, noons, and night, because many of us find ourselves in unexpected situations. In my own case, in 2015, I was on sabbatical in Greece working with an elder yogini on on a writing project when rafts of refugees from Syria and Afghanistan arrived from Turkey. And the first raft of students could have been, students from NYU. They were just walking toward me and had said they'd almost capsized, but they had to keep their bodies very, very quiet in order to not go down. And so for the next several months and then 6 trips since, I've been standing on the shore and working with refugees, which has taught me a tremendous amount about tenderness that I might not have ever learned if I had only been in the classroom. So I'm hoping this book speaks to people who both are teachers and students, and we've all been students,
Right.
but also beyond the classroom as well.
So maybe just about anyone who's would be interested in the subject then.
Anybody who's trying to keep their heart open and their learning continuing, even as so much in the world is asking us to close down emotionally and spiritually. Yeah.
Right, right. Okay. So let's get a little bit to the brass tacks definition. What is tenderness exactly?
It comes from a willingness to hold in one's mind more complexity and paradox and community than we ever thought was possible.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're often spontaneous and sometimes planned and found rituals of inclusion that lean us toward justice.
Mm-hmm.
Tenderness rests on rigorous study and an understanding of the classroom as a sacred space.
Mm-hmm.
Tenderness coaches us into habits of deep listening and sees memory as an antidote to alienation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping also that tenderness is what helps us to multiply joy.
Mm-hmm.
It's often a fleeting, illuminating reminder that we belong to each other, sometimes ineffable and often spontaneous sense that we are more than just our identities, that there's something that connects us on very deep levels. It's, I guess I would say I draw a lot on the embodied work, the engaged Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh and his writing, where he sees contemplative practices as deeply connected to socially engaged living.
Okay, so this is like a different kind of definition from the usual kind of vague definition people would think of tenderness as. I mean, tenderness, fluffiness, loving, that sort of thing. It's a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Part of why I'm excited to talk with people about it is that I'm interested in when people have felt tenderness in their own lives. For example, when did you feel tenderness yourself as a student when you were in a classroom setting? And what did that allow you to do in terms of believing in yourself?
Mm,
And what rituals do we have in our lives that allow us to feel that place of tenderness? Because so many of us, I think, crave rituals of inclusion and belonging. And that means going back into our own memories. And I don't know about for you, when do you think you have felt tenderness in your life?
mm. Okay, okay, interesting, interesting. Well, in answer to that, I guess it was earlier this evening. I don't know when I petted my cats.
Yeah,
There's
that's a
there's some
good.
there's something about an animal, that they just they give love, without unconditionally. There's the word I'm looking for.
That's a beautiful example. So how do we tap into that feeling when we're actually yelling at each other in a classroom?
Hmm.
Or when people have taken sides to the point where it's very difficult to really understand each other deeply, what kinds of rituals do we need to be able to remind ourselves that we can disagree? In fact, we can have very, very different worldviews, but still stay in the same room together. You
Right.
know, in a we're in a moment in history where uh, any kind of disagreement can make people feel as if there's going to be some kind of violence.
Hmm.
And so to find ways for us to be able to honor each other's worldviews without thinking we have to become the other or alienate or eliminate the other, that's some of the hardest work. And this whole feeling of being able to pet your cat and what that brings out in you is part of the contemplative work of tapping into that when we're in difficult situations.
Okay. Okay. Got that. Got that. So, Becky, your book is about teaching in the classroom environment, I believe, mostly. So, what is just for us to get the baseline here? What is presently so where the educational system is concerned, where tenderness is concerned?
I'm thinking, for example, of a friend of mine who teaches in the Boston public schools, and she tells a story about how teachers put the chairs and the tables that have been broken out into the hallway
Mm-hmm.
for the janitors to pick up so that they can bring them new chairs. And the question that my friend asked is, what happens to the teachers who are bent and broken?
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of services and support are available to teachers who are day after day going into the classroom in these sometimes harsh situations? So for me, some of this is about self-care
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that, especially for those of us who are in service and helping communities what we need to do to be able to take care of ourselves. So,
Right, right.
for example, when I use meditation in the classroom, or as someone who teaches yoga in my college and doctoral courses, I need to be sure that I have a very strong yoga practice myself, because I can't bring that contemplative space to other people unless I already know it in myself.
Okay. So Becky, I just want to backtrack a little bit because
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure there are quite a few people out there, listeners, who who have no idea what the kind of stress that it is that teachers face. So, what is it about
Mm.
the teaching profession in particular that makes it so stressful?
I'm thinking, for example, about my mother, who was a teacher in high school for 40 years,
Hmm.
and she gave her all to her teaching. She taught special needs students, and then she taught in multiracial spaces in Phoenix and in urban schools, and then in Boston and in Los Angeles, and she taught art history and she taught great literature. But there were many days where she didn't even have time to go to the bathroom between her classes, and she
Hmm.
didn't have time to even go to lunch.
Hmm.
I've talked to teachers who talk about having urinary tract infections because they've had to
Wow.
hold themselves back from even going to the bathroom, or getting switched from room to room constantly, or having to pay for supplies to cover the walls that have holes on them
Hmm.
so that students come in and feel as if they're in a safe environment. So those kinds of structural issues, I think, create a lot of stress for teachers. And then at the college level, the increased focus on teaching to the test, and also the focus on professionalization and being sure that students can get a job right out of school, often means we don't have the time for slow learning, for really slowing down the process long enough for people to think clearly about what they're reading. No, all the emphasis on technology runs the risk sometime of students even ever being able to sit with each other.
Hmm.
I know a number of my classes, students are shocked when we first spend time learning each other's names. We go around in a circle and everybody says their name and where their name came from and whether they were supposed to be a boy and turned out to be a girl, and if their name was hyphenated or if their name was cut when they immigrated through Ellis Island, or if their family name was lost because of slavery. And they each tell the story of their names, and then we go around and everyone memorizes the names of everybody else. And then at the beginning of every single class, all the way through the semester, 2 or 3 students say the names of the students in the class. It's a way of saying we're grounded here and we belong to each other. And if you're not there, we're going to miss you. And that kind of naming is a process of slowing down the learning so that we understand it as an embodied practice rather than something just in our heads.
Okay. So what I'm getting here then is that the educational system is geared more towards efficiency. I mean, getting kids the skills that's needed to work more than, I don't know, nurturing them, nurturing their development. Is this correct?
Well, yes, exactly. Nurturing people's development can go hand in hand with developing skills. So when I was teaching at Duke University, for example, in the African American Studies department, I was teaching birth and death, the sociology of joy and suffering class. And so it made sense at some point that we were talking about the attacks on 9/11.
Mm.
And I asked students where they were on that day. And they were all in school, but they said not one of their teachers, not one of their professors stopped to say, hey, this is what's going on. It's as if people were going on that day as if no emergency was occurring. And it turns out that many students in the class had family that were either killed in 9/11 or were connected to people who were injured.
Right.
And so you think about when we're acting as if business as usual, even as we're watching the epidemic of school shootings right now, or the epidemic of shootings in churches, this is profoundly disturbing to people. And my sense is that if we take the time to talk about what's currently going on, it allows people to connect it to the literature and the scholarship that we're reading. So it's not having to choose between being embodied and being intellectual, but by seeing the intellect and the body and the spirit as intimately connected to each other.
Okay, I got that. So this brings up another question I have. What's your exactly is your definition of embodied?
I'm talking about embodied as a psychological and emotional and spiritual and political practice, because
Okay.
I say political because not everybody is been allowed to stay in their bodies. And some of what I'm concerned about is how many students and faculty have had to leave their bodies at some point in their lives, and they come into the classroom without that full capacity.
Hmm.
When I started to realize that some students have had to flee their bodies because of their time in the military, or because of sexual abuse, or because of police brutality, or because of some injuries that they had experienced because of other kinds of trauma, I realized that we actually needed rituals to help people come back into their bodies.
Hmm.
And I found myself running around asking the plumber, "Are you in your body?" And asking, dancers, "Are you in your body?" And
Uh-huh.
asking,
And
because
I guess you got some pretty weird expressions from that.
exactly, like, what are you talking about? But then when I start to give examples, people say, "Well, yeah, huh.
Hmm.
I often don't feel like I am in my body, or that I had to leave my body a long time ago because it didn't feel safe to be there."
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So, all right, I got that. So it's the connect. Okay. Cool. Interesting. So it seems to me, that this you mentioned like the reactions during 9/11. It seems to me that it occurs to me that there's some sort of compartmentalization that goes on. Like education is different from, I don't know how you call it, real life or current events. Would you say that this is kind of like what we're seeing right now with the way, more or less, the way some people react to what is going on right now, current events?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of dissociation among politicians and among educators and among the current administration. It's as if that we're living in some kind of video game rather than in real life. I'm thinking, for example, of I was recently teaching poetry workshops in refugee camps in Thessaloniki and Athens and in Lesbos, Greece. And one of the 14-year-old refugees in the class said they were shooting it at us like deer, like we were deer.
Hmm.
He was talking about the military in Syria, and that's like strikingly similar to what we're reading about and seeing now of people with, assault rifles shooting at people as if they're some kind of prey.
Yeah.
And that level of disregard for humanity makes me need to step way back and say, what do we need to do to create an environment so that it would never be even thinkable to shoot at each other? I'm remembering about when I was in Bali, in Ubud in Bali, and I was talking with some people who've grown up there, and they could not remember a time when there had ever been a murder.
Hmm.
And some of them had never even seen a gun.
Hmm.
So it's possible in the world to live in a place where we're not worried that the next church that we're walking into, or temple or mosque, is going to be a scene of a massacre. It's possible. And that means holding on to what the social historian Robin Kelly refers to as freedom dreams, that we all need to have that still in us, that ability to dream a world that is not based on violence.
Hmm. Okay, okay. Well, as you mentioned, there are examples in this world, so it's definitely possible,
It's definitely possible.
right? So let's get on to what you envision for education. Since I mean, education is like the foundation for a lot of kids for their adulthood. What is your vision for education, as it can be, where tenderness is involved?
I'm reminded of a quote by the Muskogee poet and saxophone player Joy Harjo in a book that she wrote called A Map to the Next World. And she says, a human mind is small when thinking of small things.
Mm-hmm.
It is large when embracing the maker of walking, thinking, and flying.
Mm.
So my vision for education is where students come and are so captivated by and enthralled by the material that they feel like they are walking and thinking and flying at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's some of why I've brought yoga into the classroom, because yoga allows people to find a way to be fully in their body as they're breathing, since breath is so connected to being able to be in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to see when students are in their bodies how much more focused and attentive and alive they are with the material.
Mm.
I'm thinking, for example, of a time when I was teaching a course called Working for Social Justice, and it was like, I don't know, 6 weeks into the class, and I came in, and the students, they just looked exhausted. They were full-time students, and many
Right.
of them were parents, and they were also working in their activist internships. And I was supposed to be teaching this book by Audre Lorde called Sister Outsider, which is one of my most favorite books. And I could see that they were so tired that I couldn't quite imagine that they would be able to really engage. So we did a little bit of yoga together, and then I asked them to get into Shavasana, which is when you just lay flat on your back,
Mm-hmm.
and all of them immediately fell asleep.
Okay.
For about 20 minutes, they were lying on the carpet, almost like question marks, wiggling around the legs of the table, sleeping.
Right.
And then they woke up.
Mm-hmm.
And once they woke up and we sat together, it was the most inspired and alive and vibrant conversation on Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider that I had ever witnessed.
Mm.
So the 20 minutes that I took in that quiet, contemplative place by really looking at what the students needed
Mm-hmm.
allowed us to engage in a very deep way. So a long answer to your beautiful question is I would like to see contemplative practices be invited into the classroom
Mm-hmm.
to allow students to engage not only at the level of the mind, but also at the level of the body,
Right.
so that we can be rigorous thinkers and beings together.
Mm. Right. I can just hear some of my I don't know some of my professors and my teachers in elementary and high school. I mean, they would have thought like sleeping in class is a blasphemy. Good Lord, why do that? But in that sense,
Well,
it does make sense.
I mean, it's not like every day that we take a nap,
Yeah.
but when the students are fully attentive in a class and they're very engaged and want to be there, there is a whole other level of productivity that occurs.
Mm.
And where I actually started to learn about contemplative practices was from an inorganic chemistry teacher at the University of California at Santa Cruz, where I did my undergraduate work. So these practices are not only old, because I've been a student and a teacher for a kind of a long time,
Right.
but also don't necessarily only need to be in sociology classes or women's studies classes. They are actually, and there's increasing research now that's showing that yoga and meditation and mindfulness and free writing and walking meditation can increase people's productivity and resilience. And also, it has a beautiful effect on people's writing abilities.
Mm. Right. Very interesting. Very interesting. All right. So
Mm.
that's definitely a different I don't know outcome, a different way of thinking about education. I mean, if and especially for productivity is concerned.
I mean, yeah, that's probably a good thing for me to mention is that in a typical course that I teach, there's 8 or 9 books
Right.
that students are reading, in their entirety. And they're writing a paper a week, and they're doing a group project, and they're also writing a research paper. So it's not as if I've had to compromise the rigor in any way.
Right.
It's that I'm tapping into an energetic presence.
Hmm.
And, my work is really about the creation of multiracial communities. That's, if I'm thinking about what I've been most interested in trying to be part of all these years, it comes from being an anti-racist and a feminist. And in order to create multiracial communities, both in the classroom but also in our lives, we need to be able to breathe with each other. I'm thinking, for example, I teach at the Dorchester YMCA in Boston, and what it means for people, 5 different languages in a classroom and across age, across generation and religion, to be lying on our backs and doing the happy baby pose. There's a
Right.
laughter and a creativity and a vibrancy that occurs among people who were really not slated necessarily to really see each other in a deep
Mhm.
kind of way.
Right. Okay. Well, very interesting. Very interesting right there. Okay. So, this is a whole new viewpoint. But let's say, Becky, you met up with someone who realizes that, things could be better in the educational system. And let's say you had only enough time to tell that person one thing about your vision, your viewpoint. What would be that one thing you would tell that person?
I guess I'd ask them about when they felt most alive and confident and available to learn in their own lives,
Mm-hmm.
what made that happen,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can then, as a teacher, try to reproduce that, to draw on our own lived experience of when we felt tenderness and tap into that,
Mm-hmm.
and then try to practice that. The wonderful, powerful, and brave novelist Salman Rushdie wrote a passage in his book called The Ground Beneath Her Feet that to me captures what I'm trying to talk about in a less eloquent way about tenderness. He says, 5 mysteries hold the keys to the unseen: the act of love and the birth of a baby and the contemplation of great art, and being in the presence of death or disaster and hearing the human voice lifted in song. There are occasions when the bolts of the universe fly open and we are given a glimpse of what is hidden, an F of the ineffable. That to me is the heart of tenderness.
Wow. Wow. Deep words right there. Okay, cool. Okay, then. So, in closing, the book is Teaching with Tenderness Towards Embodied Practice. The authors are guest Becky Thompson, and you can find her book on Amazon. Becky, I understand our listeners might be able to check out your book on other sites as well.
Sure, I have a newly designed website that I'm pretty excited about. It was many months in the making. It's BeckyThompsonYoga.com.
Hmm.
And I'd love to have people dial in there. And also my email address is becky.thompson@simmons.edu. I'd love to have conversations with people, back and forth communication. I would most welcome it.
All right, cool. So, listeners, anyone interested, go over to the website and feel free to contact Becky if you want to. So, Becky, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being an author story. It was very insightful having you with us today.
Bye bye.
Wait, okay. So, listeners, by all means, please feel free to go ahead and check out Teaching with Tenderness Towards an Embodied Practice, which you can do so right now by going to the Amazon link in the description below the video. And if you'd like to follow our author interviews on YouTube, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. So catch you guys next time on the next episode of Author Story, where we'll highlight another interesting book and another inspiring author.